Welcome back to Sunday Medz. One of my favorite scriptures is from Romans chapter 5, and I'm going to read verses 6 and 8. You see, at just the right time, when we were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. My encouragement from this scripture today is let God be God. While we were still sinners, while we were still his enemies, he was working on our behalf. How much more now that we are working in conjunction with him? A lot of times we come upon situations that make us fearful that if we don't do XYZ at the split second right moment, if we don't time it perfectly, then we're going to miss out on something, or the universe is going to implode and our lives are just going to derail. But God is way bigger than that. While we were enemies of God, he was working on our behalf. When we're sleeping, he's working on our behalf. Even in the midst of our sin, he is still working on our behalf. When we don't have a clue what's going on around us, he is still working on our behalf. When God is intent on doing something, intervening with justice, answering our cries, he is going to do it regardless. When the children of Israel were standing before the Red Sea, they did not have a clue how to pray to say, oh God, part the Red Sea for us so that we can walk on dry land and escape from our enemies. That had never been done. We only have that reference now because it happened to them, and God did it anyways. So it wasn't because they had fasted for 10 days, or they were holding on in faith, or they had a prayer chain going, or they had all of these scriptures that they were holding on to, or they were manifesting. No. The reason the Red Sea parted is because God wanted it to part at the time that it was going to part, and nothing was going to stop him from doing that. Jesus is always interceding on your behalf. God is always working all things for your good. His love is unconditional. So even if you are disobedient, even if you fall to pieces and you're breaking down and you don't feel like your faith is enough, that's okay. You cannot derail God. You cannot dethrone God. You are not going to kick all the planets out of orbit. God is in control. He is very intentional on his plans for salvation and sanctification. He promised us that he will continue his work until he's able to present us blameless, spotless before him on that day. That scripture, that promise did not come with the clause that this can only happen if you have your stuff together all the time, if your faith is at a level 10 all the time, if you are confident and jumping out of bed in the morning ready to take on the world. No, he's very much aware of our frail humanity. He's very much aware of everything that we are contending with. That is why there's so many scriptures encouraging us against doubt and fear and anxiety and worry, because we are prone to those things, and he's very much aware. He is our high priest. He understands what we're going through. He had his own breakdown in the Garden of Gethsemane. So he's not standing there ready to accuse and condemn because your faith slipped from a level 10 to a level 8. That's what he is there for. He is our encourager. He is our counselor. He is our Prince of Peace. He is there with us all the time. That's why he said he would never leave us or forsake us, because he wants us to know that he is always with us. And he's always with us because we always need him with us. We cannot do it without him. So let God be God. Your salvation, your sanctification, the promises for your life, the mission, the destiny, the breakthrough, it doesn't rely solely on you. Cast your burdens on God. Let him lead your paths. Let him take charge and be the one that is in control. He's the only one that does it as well as he does, and he's the only one that can bring us to the finish line. He's the only one that can be faithful to his word and faithful to his promises. We really are warring every single day against a very real enemy. And Jesus is the only one that has been victorious over him. So we just need to trust him that he's got this. It is not all on our shoulders. Be encouraged that Peter's denial didn't bump Peter's life off of its trajectory. David's sins didn't bump him off of his trajectory. It's not like we sin or we mess up or we have a moment of weakness and God is like, here goes another one. Now we're just going to have to find somebody else and start over from scratch because this one forfeited all the good things that I had for them. That would be an extremely fickle, unreliable, conditional, fair weather friend God. And that is not the God that we serve. We are seated in heavenly places with him. And that kind of placement is not conditional on how we feel in the moment or how we rate ourselves in the moment. So just because you don't feel like you are being Christian enough today, it doesn't mean that on that day you are not seated in heavenly places. You are still up there. I love Romans 4 verse 20, which is a very confounding scripture to me because God's viewpoint of Abraham was that his faith never wavered. And I read that scripture and I am confused because there was this whole Ishmael moment where it looked to me like, yeah, Abraham's faith certainly wavered, like it more than wavered. Like Abraham concussed or something and completely forgot all of God's promises, and then boom, there was an Ishmael. But God looked at that and he said, my servant Abraham, he never wavered in his faith. So God's view of us is through a love-tinted lens. He sees us through the eyes of love. He sees us through his son Jesus. So trust that God is still God, even when we don't feel that we are being as Christian as we should be. And just let God be God. Let God be the God of your breakthrough, of your promises, of your miracles. Trust that he can do it. Trust that he isn't banking only on your strength, on your faith, on our wisdom, on our knowledge, on how many scriptures we know. He is a great big God. He's been doing a great job before we were born, and he will continue to do so after we die and move on into the next life. He's not relying on us to hold up the earth. So be encouraged and see you next week.